We left off last video refactoring our network call into our view model, as you can see here. Well, one thing we're missing is the error handling. That's what we're going to tackle in this video. You can see in the failure case, we're just printing error.localizeDescription. Well, in this case, we want to show an alert depending on what error gets passed to our failure case. Just to recap, back in our network manager, remember, we're passing the failure case, right? Depending on what happens, we're passing unable to complete, invalid response, invalid data, etc. That's our AP error enum. You'll notice there's no like raw value like we did before. Remember, that was only temporary. All we need to know is like, hey, what was the case? And then here in the view model, we'll figure out like what we want the error to say. We'll create that alert item and that alert context. If you remember that from our barcode app, we're basically going to do that same setup, except in this app, it'll be built out a bit more because there's more screens, there's more opportunities to show errors. So you'll get to see us build upon that concept, but the basis is the same. So that being said, let's create our alert file. So click the appetizers folder, Command N for new file, Swift file, hit next. And if you remember, we called this alert, and this is where we put our alert item and our alert context. It's so similar. In fact, we're going to do file open recent. We're going to pull up our barcode scanner and copy and paste from our alert view here. So pull up your barcode app, copy paste this, just save some time. Some may say that you should maybe avoid doing this. Like I could see the argument for that because copy paste errors, I've said it a few times in this course, they definitely are a thing. But what you're going to find as you build more and more projects throughout your career is you're going to have a lot of the same code that kind of gets shared, maybe tweaked a little bit, but for the most part, it gets shared between projects. This alert item is something that I've been using in all my Swift UI projects. So let's close out the barcode and just copy and paste it here into our alert. And I wanted to show that because, I just want to be transparent. Like that's how I legitimately work, right? Like if I have to build even like my network manager, again, just being straight up, like I don't type this out every time. I have the same structure of a network manager in like all the apps that I make. So when I'm making a new app, I'll literally copy and paste like the first chunk of my network manager, paste it in, and then make my adjustments. And again, I'm telling you that even though some may consider that a bad habit for the copy paste stuff, but again, just want to be transparent. That's actually how I work. Anyway, let's make the tweaks. Because like I said, you can almost never copy and paste and not change anything. There's always some tweaks to be made. One thing that I didn't do correctly in the barcode is I made the title and the message a string. And if you remember in the barcode app, I had to like go back and like, I forgot I got to wrap these in a text to show the alert. Well, let's just, take out that step altogether and make these texts instead of a string, right? So we'll make them text in our alert item. You'll see how this, benefits us and cleans up the call site when we implement this. That's the first tweak we need to make. The next tweak is, these aren't our two errors, right? These are the errors specific to the camera from the barcode app. So this is what we got to change. But to me, the value of copying and pasting it is like, I get the same structure, right? I just got to change the names and then, what the strings actually say. So let's start changing this. If I go to my AP error, I see I have invalid URL, invalid response, invalid data, unable to complete. Okay, so we're going to create those here. So I'll do, let me just make 2 more here to get all 4 of my structure here. Okay, so this first one, again, was invalid data. This was invalid response. This was invalid URL. And this was unable to complete. Okay, and if you know me, I like to get these equal signs lined up and not have anything look ridiculous. There we go, looks nice and neat. And while we're here, so this is what a lot of people don't like about like lining up the equal signs like I do, is sometimes it messes up your lining here, and then you got to take that extra 3 or 4 seconds to line that up again. I don't know. To me, having things be nice and neat and easy on the eyes to read is worth those extra couple seconds to line it up. If you don't agree, cool, don't line your stuff up. No big deal. I'm just giving you the reasons why I do it. Okay, so I'm going to call these server errors. So one thing to think about when you're creating these error messages, right, is oftentimes developers, will make these error messages for themselves. Like if I said, could not parse the data, that means nothing to the user. It means a lot to the developer, but it doesn't mean anything to the user. So that's why you'll see a lot of these messages not really developer focused, right? You want to focus them towards the user. So, you may not want to give all the details. Oops, I was supposed to say server error. So here, I would say, the data received from the server was invalid. please contact support. And I forgot about our new change here, right? We made these text. So again, instead of string, wrap these in a text. And right, by doing it here, I don't have to do it at the call site. So text. I probably should have done this before I copied and pasted, so I don't have to write this out a bunch of times. Okay, so all I did was each title and message, I just wrapped it in a text, sorry, to make it a text view, not just a string. So that's all I did during that fast forward typing part. But okay, back to our error messages. Again, invalid response. I'm just going to call this server error again. They're all going to be called server error pretty much. And we're going to say invalid response from the server. Please try again later or contact support. And then invalid URL, right? Like we don't want to tell the user like it's an invalid URL. They might not know what that means. So you'll say something like, you know, there was an issue connecting to the server. If this persists, please contact support. And look, I'm not gonna lie, I don't claim to be the guru of error messages, right? My error messages could use some work. We're keeping these generic, but you know, you should put some time into coming up with good error messages that really, you know, inform your user. Again, I forgot this is server error, and then server error. That's the title of them all. And then for the unable to complete, we'll do something like this. Unable to complete your request at this time. Please check your internet connection. And I'm going to say that because most of the time when we get that overall error, again, back to our network manager, this is what fires it off. The vast majority of the time, that is because there's no network. There's obviously other ways to trigger it, but most of the time, you know, the internet's down or something like that. Okay, back to our alert. So what we have set up here is our same old alert item from our barcode app, and then we created our 4 alert contexts. So this is the same exact thing we did in the barcode app, just adding 2 extra errors. Okay, so now that we have our alert set up, right? We have the item and then our specific alert context for the specific cases. Now let's go put these to use. And we're gonna go to our appetizer list view model, right? Where, you know, we're getting the network call and then we gotta handle the failure case. So as you see, we're passing an error from the failure case, like I said, from the network manager, right? We're passing .unable to complete, .invalid response, etc. So in our view model, we can switch off of that error and show the right alert accordingly. But before we do that, I gotta actually create the alert item on my view model. So again, this is exactly what we did in the barcode app at published var alert item, and that is of type alert item that we just created. And it's going to be an optional. And again, it's published because anytime our alert item changes, we want to broadcast that, notify our list view that, hey, it's time to show that alert. We're going to connect that here in a second. But we have to make this alert item like a different alert based on what we get back from our error, right? So, okay, let's switch off this error that we get back here. So we'll do switch error. And the first case will be .invalid, we'll say data, or response, whatever. And the order doesn't matter. Here's how I do my switch statements. I type the first case, and then I let Xcode say the switch must be exhaustive. And I'm like, yes, Xcode, I know. Thank you for typing that for me. I'm lazy. So in the case of invalid response, we want to make the alert item equal to alert context dot invalid response, right? So what we're doing here is we're tying the alert item to the alert context we created for invalid response, which back to the alert here, you can see for invalid response, we're going to show server error, invalid response from the server, please try again or contact support, right? So we're going to show this alert. And you see reference to alert item needs self, so I can do the quick fix here, or what got introduced in Swift 5.3 is the ability to capture self up here. That way you don't have to use self everywhere in your closure here, right? Because each one of those would have had to have self next to it. But again, new in Swift 5.3, captured up here, and you don't need to use it. Again, we still needed to use it here, not to make sure we're referencing self, but to differentiate between this appetizers, right, that's attached to the view model, or the local appetizers. And again, that's because they were the same name. If they were named differently, I wouldn't need the self here. Okay, just a little clear that up in case you're confused. So now we're just gonna do some copying and pasting again, because we're just going to set the alert item to different alert contexts based on what happens, right? So invalid URL, again, alert context, invalid URL, same thing, invalid data, now invalid data, and unable to complete is unable to complete. And I'm going to let this breathe a little bit, have the two, put a space in between these two cases, and then each individual case have a space. This is just formatting. Again, I think this is easier on the eyes, easier to read rather than it being all clumped up. And if I only have 2 cases, I'll probably keep them clumped up. The more cases you have, the harder it is to read when they're clumped up. So this is completely subjective styling. I just wanted to put that out there. But what we have set up when we get our failure, depending on what that failure is, we're setting our alert item to the alert context that we created. So what triggers here is this alert item variable here will change. That change is going to cause this publish to say, hey, whoever's listening, my alert item changed. Do what you need to do. So we've set up the broadcast side of things. We haven't set up the listener, if you will. So into our appetizer list view, on our navigation view, we're going to do the .alert. And again, this should look familiar, right? You can do the is presented. We talked about this last time. That's just based on a true or false variable that you pass in. But we want to have this alert be triggered when an item changes. That's what this item content is, right? And the binding needs to be identifiable, but that is our $viewModel.alert item. Right? And remember, our alert item here does conform to identifiable. We talked about that in the barcode video. So back to our appetizer list. Now the content we need is our alert. So we can do alert in, and now we do capital A for alert and initialize a new SwiftUI alert. And just like before, we're going to do title message dismiss button. So the title is now alert, and we're actually going to change this name to alert item just to be real clear on like what we're talking about here. So alert item dot title. And now this is where last time I had to like wrap this in text. I messed that up. Well, now because we put that text in our alert item, we can just keep it neat at the call site and just do alert item dot title. Same thing, alert item dot message, and then alert item dot dismiss button. Now, quick disclaimer on how I'm doing these alerts. This is for the basic alert that just pops up and you hit OK to dismiss, right? If you had an alert that had like maybe 2 options or 2 or 3 buttons that did something on the buttons, you can't do that. We have to create a whole new thing, which we'll get to, later in this section. But, majority of your alerts are going to just be the OK to dismiss type stuff. So it's nice to have that, structure. Okay, so we should be all connected here. Let's run it on the simulator. I'm going to run it first. Nothing should happen. This should look like it's been looking. And yep, here we are. This is what we had before. Nothing has changed. All we did was mess with the alerts, but I wanted to show that real quick. Now let's start messing with things to break it, like on purpose. So going into our network manager, let's put a nice little emoji in our our URL, right? Because what's going to happen here is URL is going to try to initialize a URL object from the appetizer URL string. Remember, I said this returns an optional because if it can't create a URL object, it's going to return nil. So what's going to happen with our emoji here, it's going to be an invalid URL. URL is going to return nil. So we should go into the invalid URL alert. Let's see here. Let's test this. There it is. Okay. Yep. Server error. There was an issue connecting to the server. If this persists, please contact support. Cool. All right. Let's just try one more. Let's get rid of that. Let's turn off our Wi-Fi here. If anybody gets the reference to this Wi-Fi, leave it in the comment. Kudos to you if you get that. Okay, so let's run it again with the Wi-Fi turned off. Yep, server error, unable to complete your request at this time. Please check your internet connection. Okay, so our errors seem to be working. Let me turn my Wi-Fi back on. Okay, so our errors are working. One last overview to finish out the video. Again, our network call passes in various errors depending on what happens. Here in our alert, we created our alert item. We have our alert context for all the various different errors that we could have. In our view model, on our list view, right, depending on the failure case, what gets passed back, we make our alert item equal to whatever alert item is applicable to that specific error. That sets this alert item, and because this is published on our observable object of the view model, it broadcasts it out. Our appetizer list view is listening to that because we have our view model as a state object. So here in our alert, this viewModel.alert item has changed. This alert is listening to that change. So when it receives that change, it presents the alert with the title, message, and dismiss button based on the alert item that we passed. That's the overview of what's going on to show those alerts. So the basics of our errors are in place. We're going to be building upon this, in future videos and in our other screens, but this is the basics. That was a bit of review. Like we did a lot of the similar stuff in the barcode, but again, practice, 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 repetition, repetition, repetition. Let's move on.